addressing how computer science courses can satisfy graduation requirements. That is existing code. We passed that bill 3 years ago. We passed another bill 2 years ago that would allow us to eliminate the 40 hours of block time to allow more flexibility. We're talking about high school graduation and diplomas. We're talking about high school redesign. We don't have enough teachers. I'll probably reluctantly vote no, depending on what the motion is. But I applaud the direction that you're trying to take this. Appreciate it. Delegate Bell.
I echo everything the chairman just said, and I think we have a serious responsibility to offer these opportunities, not just in terms of graduation, but so that this generation of young people is prepared for the jobs that will be available to them. I think it's a wonderful idea. Having said that, there are a lot of balls in the air right now around high school graduation, redesign. It just seems like a lot. And so, Delegate Davis, with all due respect to you and your efforts, I'm going to move that we lay this bill gently on the table.
There's a motion to lay the bill on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of laying the bill on the table say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? One opposed. Delegate Davis, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We look forward to continuing to work with you. And we're going to continue to work on this subject right this minute with my House Bill 1663. There's a substitute on the bill. I will ask Delegate Bell to act as subcommittee chair. Delegate Bell, thank you. This hopefully will be quick. Yeah.
We're going to have the substitute in front of.
Thank you very much.
Let's take action on the substitute.
Move the substitute.
And without objection, set the substitute. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1663, we talked about this at great length in our first meeting, and if you remember the testimony from Chris Dovey of Code VA, we had some concerns kind of how this was floating through the system. I'll remind the members that last year in the budget and then again in the governor's introduced budget, there's $550,000 in year one and $550,000 in year two, very generically to be assigned to training and providing professional development for teachers. This bill that is now a substitute in front of you is designed to do three things. One, as a practice, we don't like to appropriate money to an individual or an individual named company. So with the very, very passionate support of the Northern Virginia Community College, who has offered to administer this for the Commonwealth, not for just Northern Virginia, you'll see in subsection A, Northern Virginia Community College shall contract with a nonprofit designed to develop, market, implement high-quality and effective computer science training and professional development activities for public school teachers throughout the Commonwealth for the purpose of improving computer science literacy of all public schools in the Commonwealth. Very, very important that we administer this program through a known entity. Very important that we focus on the entire Commonwealth, and very important, Mr. Chairman, that we focus on training and providing support for teachers. That's subsection A. Subsection B then says, and this is a very dynamic and fluid industry, so the community college shall establish an advisory committee for the purpose of advising the college and its nonprofit partner organization on the development, marketing, implementation, i.e. on their mission. The Secretary of Commerce of Trade, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Technology shall each submit to the college a list of names of qualified individuals, and the college shall appoint members to such advisory committee for such lists. Obviously, we want input from 3 secretariats, from people from around the Commonwealth, to make sure that the mission is being accomplished. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions, but this is a framework for which I think we can train and develop teachers to help us further our mission in computer science. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jason, question from the subcommittee? Hearing none. Anyone in the audience wish to speak to the substitute?
It's a tone, it's tone.
Must be.
How many people really don't want to speak to this?
Okay, hearing absolutely nothing. Delegate.
In light of where we were to where we are now, I think the patrons got a fantastic idea. Appropriate time, I'll make a motion.
It is the appropriate time.
Move to report. Oh, second.
Moved and properly seconded to report the bill. Is there any further? The substitute. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill reports.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody and their hard work on that bill over the last couple of days. Is Delegate Lemunion here? Nope. Is Delegate Adams here? He did ask me to take his bill by for the day, so administratively, all those in favor? All those opposed? Good, so that's by for the day. We talked about Rasul, Lemunion's not here. And so, the main event, in 36 minutes left, we have two bills dealing with full-time virtual education. By order of number, we will take House Bill 1400. Delegate Bell will present his bill. Ryan, is there a substitute or is it as presented? Good, thank you. Delegate Bell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1400 is simply the latest version of a bill that's been with us for several years now. Last year was House Bill 8. It's identical to that bill. In 2015, we passed a very similar bill. The governor signed it with a reenactment clause and some suggestions, which we worked on in the 2016 version to try to answer those concerns. And it passed again in the General Assembly and the governor vetoed it. This year, we're back with a bill identical to the one that was vetoed last year. There's really nothing new, Mr. Chairman, except the dates, of course, have been shifted to accommodate enactments and because last year's dates wouldn't work. I'll be happy to tell you as much as you want to hear. I think the opposition hadn't changed, I don't believe, neither has the support. In fact, if you'd like me to tell you what the opposition's going to say, I could probably do that. I can also tell you what my supporters are going to say. We have talked extensively with Secretary Trent and the governor's office, and as you know, Delegate Bulba has a bill, and we have tried to find a path forward because if nothing else ever happens, you have to feel good about where we've brought virtual education to this point. 5 years ago, and Mr. Chairman, you were with me for some of this, virtual education, full-time virtual education was laughed at. It was the worst idea they ever heard of.
For a comment.
Yes, sir.
Delegate Bell and I were in a meeting one time, and the presenter said, virtual education is like getting a gym membership. You get the membership and then you never use it again. And the two of us were so deeply offended by this comment. I mean, we were sitting there looking at each other going, is this for real? Like, did she say that out loud?
Mr. Chairman, you can't make it up.
I mean, it's crazy, right? So I applaud your efforts to push through it.
Anyway, just briefly, this bill establishes the board of the Virginia Virtual School as a policy agency in the executive branch of state government for the purpose of governing the full-time virtual school programs offered to students enrolled in the Virginia Virtual School. The Secretary of Education is responsible for such agency. The 14-member board is given operational control of the school and assigned powers and duties. Beginning with the 2019-2020 school year, the bill requires the school to be open to any school-age person in the Commonwealth and to provide an educational program meeting the standards of quality for grades kindergarten through 12 with a maximum enrollment of 5,000 students statewide. The bill requires the average state share of standards of quality per pupil funding for each enrolled student to be transferred to the school. In other words, the money would follow the child.
Delegate Bell, what's the current average state appropriation? Do you know that number? I thought it was somewhere around
It's
$4,700.
$4,800.
Give or take.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the question that has always been raised is about the constitutionality of this bill. I feel confident that we have answered that. We have a letter from the Attorney General's office in 2013, which confirmed we fashioned this bill, the structure of this bill, after the Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind in Stanton. It was our model for it. And I don't think the constitutionality of that school has ever been questioned. However, this week, there was another letter from the current Attorney General's office which does question the constitutionality. As nearly as I can tell, this most recent letter flips us back to being a school division, which is what we moved away from 4 years ago, to become just a school. So now we have two letters. We have competing informal opinions from the Attorney General's office, and something has to be settled or resolved, I think, there in order to move on. I have someone here today who can speak to it, and if the chairman sees fit, I would love to have them do that
At this time.
at this time.
I will entertain that as, yes, sir, I know you've come to join us. Please step forward and introduce you to the subcommittee and then speak to the constitutionality from your perspective.
My name is Duncan Getchell. I'm a lawyer with LeVar Woods. I was formerly Solicitor General of Virginia between 2010 and 2013. I think that this bill is constitutional, and I think that using well-established Virginia constitutional principles, I can explain why it's constitutional. Unlike the federal constitution, which gives Congress a limited enumerated powers, at least in theory, the Virginia Constitution gives to the General Assembly plenary legislative powers, so that the General Assembly is authorized to do anything that's not expressly forbidden or forbidden by clear implication in the Virginia Constitution or by the federal Constitution. Now, this gives rise in Virginia jurisprudence, constitutional jurisprudence, to a presumption of constitutionality. The Virginia Supreme Court has said repeatedly that this is the strongest presumption known to the law, and a Virginia court is not to strike down an act of the General Assembly unless it's unconstitutional beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this bill could not be attacked successfully using that standard, because what we know is that the requirement for a territorial school system with local control was in the Constitution of 1902, and it was changed slightly, but the principle is still in the Constitution of 1971. When the General Assembly sat as the Constitutional Convention for the 1971 constitutional adoption, it is presumed to have known all of the existing laws in effect and all of the existing practices. And at that time, the Commonwealth had established special purpose schools outside of the territorial school system. The school for the deaf, the school for the blind, the Miller School. And so it is clear that by not forbidding this existing practice, it was the intention of the General Assembly acting as a constitutional convention to continue these practices, to continue to allow these practices. So because this historical argument can be made and is a compelling argument, it can't be said that this bill is unconstitutional beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead, it is constitutional.
Thank you. Thank you, Duncan.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mike,
Delegate Bell, go ahead.
fully understand that the bill has to go the appropriations route again. It always does. And so we're prepared for that. And I know that there are folks on both sides of the issue here. Chairman's discretion on how best to handle that.
Thank you, Delegate Bell. I'm going to be very, very conscious of time. I want to give both sides the opportunity to speak on both bills. And so if I move you along, it is not for me being rude, but being respectful of Delegate Bulava's bill. We have a relatively hard stop at the bottom of the hour. So we're going to take this debate until about 8:11 or 8:12, and then I'm going to ask us to stop and take action. So everybody good? I'm not trying to be rude, we just want to be fair. So anyone wishing to speak in favor of Delegate Bell's House bill, please step forward.
Good morning, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair.
excuse me, if I could. I usually go to the subcommittee, but go ahead, Delegate Bulava.
Yeah, no, just a point of clarification in terms of how you want to roll this out. Are you going to, I guess, take comments on Delegate Bell's bill and then have me explain mine and take comments, and then, we can figure out what we're going to do from there. I guess I didn't know what you meant by take action and whether that closes off the potential for action on mine or the other.
My intent is not to close off any action on yours. If we act on Delegate Bell's positively or negatively, we will still hear your bill in total and take action on your bill positively or negatively. Okay. I apologize, my normal thing is, does anybody in the subcommittee want to ask a question before we go to the audience? Okay, good, thank you. Yes, sir. Speaking in favor of the bill.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm Chris White with the Vector Corporation. I'm here on behalf of Public School Options. We're a parent-based grassroots organization with 22 chapters around the country and one here in Virginia. And we focus on advocating for school choice, whether those are governor schools, magnet schools, charter schools. But here in Virginia, we've really focused on trying to expand virtual education. And we've supported Delegate Bell's model for the last few years. And I want to just point out 3 quick things that this model will do. It'll take what we're doing today with the Virginia Virtual Academy operating under the model that exists today, and it'll make it stable and sustainable for the future. Because currently the model has some holes in it. One, the Virginia Virtual Academy today is only a K-8 school, and that's because the local school divisions that they partner with determine what grade levels will be offered. We constantly have a waiting list for students to be able to get into the school. We're only able to offer K-8. Delegate Bell's bill will offer K-12. The second thing Delegate Bell's model will do, it'll end the requirement to have a partnership with a local school division in order to create the school. Don't get me wrong, the partners that the Virginia Virtual Academy have today are excellent. We wouldn't be able to exist without those partnerships. But those partnerships are always subject to change. If you get a new school superintendent, if you have an election, you get a whole new school board. If those individuals who come in don't feel that there's value here, then they can end the program. And this just isn't a hypothetical. This actually happened in 2013 with the partnership with Carroll County. When that partnership ended, 400 students from 105 localities around the state were displaced. Now, fortunately, the Virginia Virtual Academy was able to find a new partner the next year and try to assimilate them back in. But that's a risk that exists with the current model today. Delegate Bell's bill will fix that. Finally, Delegate Bell's model offers parents real school choice. I think it's important to remember why parents choose virtual education. Maybe their student is gifted and talented. Maybe their student is being bullied to the point that they actually cannot physically go to school and succeed. Maybe there's a severe medical problem that requires their student to not be able to go to a traditional brick and mortar school. Whatever the reason, parents have this option to be able to use virtual school. Delegate Bell's model will expand what we're doing today. In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I haven't asked hundreds and hundreds of parents from around the state. There's 1,500 families that are enrolled in the current Virginia Virtual Academy now, but I've just asked one, given the time constraints that we've had, to come and share her story about why this works for her family.
Yes, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Please step forward and introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name's Dahlia Ramsio, and I am from Fauquier County. I have been with Virginia Virtual Academy for about 3 years, and my 2 children are back there. I have Lizzie, who is in 5th grade, and Xander, who is currently in 1st grade. We moved to Virginia about 3 years ago. Prior to that, we were from Washington State. My daughter had taught herself to read by age 3. She was doing 500-600 piece jigsaw puzzles by age 2, 2, I mean, she was doing multiplication before age 5, and she just constantly wanted to learn and be challenged. In Washington State, I put her in a Spanish immersion program, and she went from doing nothing to being an advanced first, second grade level by mid-year kindergarten. My husband both works for the government, and we're also in the Air Force Reserves, and kept getting detailed out to DC. So we decided to have more quality family time, that we would move out to Virginia. We did our research, and we ended up in Fauquier County for the schools, and she was enrolled in the Gifted and Talented program. It was not challenging enough for her. She was getting hundreds without trying. She was reading for 5-6 hours a day. She was just not being given new material, and she was coming home very, very bored. We worked with the school. We said, what can we do? What can happen? Like, give us a chance. We'll do it next year. It'll change. We went back. Same thing happened. She was reading. She was very, very bored, and we needed something to challenge her. I wanted her to be able to know what it was like to be challenged and not earn hundreds without even trying. I did the research. We found Virginia Virtual Academy. Since joining that, she was in 3rd grade. I mean, she has flourished. She's took Spanish. She's been taking Latin. The material is challenging. The kids, are great. She's made wonderful friends who love to learn through the field trips. Her teachers are amazing. They've worked with me to help tailor, her education on any questions that I have, and I'm able to move her at her own pace so she can be challenged and not bored.
And Dolly, could you wrap up your comments?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say quickly, in addition to that, my husband's also military. When he was deployed, he was able to stay involved in both my children's education, which was amazing since he was thousands of miles away.
Dolly, thank you for your service, your family service, and your testimony this morning. Anyone else in the audience like to speak in favor briefly to the bill?
I'm Ryan Fears from the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, and we support the bill.
Ryan, thank you. Others?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chris Friend Family Foundation, in support of the bill. Just very quickly, I think most of us in this room recognize the days of zip code-based, one-size-fits-all education are numbered. And this is an opportunity to really give families an opportunity to find an education that fits their child best, and we support that.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Others in the audience in favor? Does anyone in the audience like to speak in opposition to the bill? Pat?
Pat Lace with the School Board Association. Perhaps I can speak and having other people speak, and I don't intend to step up again on the other bill. My remarks will pertain to both. We've never spoken in opposition to virtual education, and that's very important. I've spoken many times on this bill. I'm going to be like a broken record. Delegate Bell knows exactly the first point I'm going to make, and that is that we have never, ever, as a Commonwealth, determined what is quality virtual program. And I feel very strongly that before we go too far down this road and put the cart before the horse, that we really ought to determine what is a good quality program, virtual program. Let me give you one example. As far as bricks and mortar are concerned, the current standards of quality are concerned, we have staffing policies. Maybe it's 35 to 1, 38, y'all have bills requiring us to notify parents when we have a pupil-teacher ratio that goes up to a certain amount, let's say 30 to 1 or something like that. However, remember that under this legislation, the pupil-teacher ratio can go up to 250 to 1. And you're funding on the paradigm of 25 to 1. So there's a disconnect. That pertains to all virtual bills. Okay? So I wanted to make that. Secondly, I probably need to tell you folks something about me. And you wonder why in the world I'm here before the Education Committee. I was in the Attorney General's office, began back in 1970, November of 1970, left in November of 1977. And during that time, I had the benefit of the 71 Constitution coming in. I sat with the full Education Committee on the dais, writing the statutes to comply with the 71 Constitution. And I was Chief Deputy Attorney General. I don't raise constitutional arguments lightly, and I don't do it here lightly. I've heard that this legislation was intended to be crafted to be like the School for the Deaf and Blind. I wish it had been. It isn't. You will not find in the legislation for the School for the Deaf and Blind where the SOQ applies. You will not find where it's accredited, subject to the standards of accreditation like public schools are. The problem with this legislation is that it sweeps in all these things that treat the school like a school division, without complying with the other part of the Constitution that says it's gotta be under control of the school board. I will just say this to you. I don't say this lightly. I remind you of three letters, OEI. Okay? And I made comments about OEI, and you know where we are. If this was drawn like the School for the Deaf and Blind, I could not stand up here and make these statements. But it is, so with all due respect, and I don't intend to stand up again today, this morning, with all due respect, I have concerns about this bill, both from a policy standpoint and from a constitutional standpoint.
Pat, thank you for your comments. Others who would like to speak in opposition to the bill? Sorry, Delegate Bell, absolutely.
As far as what a quality program looks like, Mr. Lacy and I have had this discussion ad nauseam. And I feel like the process now to screen and validate providers, which is a process that the DOE does for these applicants. And it's a very rigorous process to determine if they can provide quality education. Not only is this application about this thick initially, there is an annual review of every one of the people who's approved as a multi-division online provider. We also have 1,500 students in this program now, and we have graduates of the program. And I believe that to some extent, at least in a program that's could probably still be called fledgling, that is an indication of the quality of the program. So I'm not, when I speak to Mr. Lacy about this, it's sort of abstract to me. I'm not sure what a quality program looks like, whether it's virtual, or how do we determine if the programs in brick and mortar schools are quality. The only quality yardstick we have is what the DOE says is quality. And I think their process to determine who provides these services qualifies us.
Thank you, Delegate. Go ahead, Tom.
Congressman Superintendent Association, and again, we voiced these concerns before. Our concerns are that we're setting up a separate state agency to handle something that's best handled by the local school divisions and the State Board of Education. We've heard and see in a number of ways that they're moving towards this fairly quickly. My experience as a superintendent, and I'll use the example of homeschool students, it's best when these students are in some way tied back to the school division. They often come back to you or come into you at some point in time. And the integration of that is a lot easier if they've been part of your process the whole time. There is an inherent difference between VSDB and this school in terms of connection with the local school division, and that typically those students are placed there by an IEP in which both the parents and the local school division sign. So there's some cooperation there, but we are in opposition to the bill.
We have 3 minutes left of testimony on this bill, and then that will stop. Yes, sir.
Ron Jordan, represent Chesapeake Public Schools. Our concern is more along the lines of what Mr. Smith said. It's the relationship between the state and the local divisions. Our superintendent and the board very strongly believes the state's role in full-time virtual education should be limited to guaranteeing access and ensuring quality. How that's done should be left to the local board. The school divisions in Southampton Roads are currently in the process of developing a multi-divisional virtual school, full-time virtual school program with WHRO. They own WHRO, so it's not going to cost the students a lot of money to enroll in this program. And they believe that's the better approach.
Thank you, Ron. Any other comments from the audience? Very quickly. And Holly, did you want to speak?
We oppose the bill for the reasons that Dr. said.
Thank you, Barry.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, in
Deputy
its
Secretary.
current form, with all respect to the patron, the administration still opposes the bill.
Thank you. Members of the subcommittee, any comments or questions on the bill? I have one comment, and I'll take any other comments or questions from the members. You two good down there?
Mr. Chairman, just so you understand, we were discussing monitoring power and constitutional aspect.
Then you can, that's awesome. I don't want to be a part of that discussion, so. Duncan lost me at plenary. there's 3 points here that we discuss every year. It's the policy of virtual school. Do we think people should be able to partake in virtual school or not? Largely, I feel that the Commonwealth is prepared to allow people to understand that one size does not fit all. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a bill from Delegate Bulova. So the policy, in my opinion, seems clear. There's a home for virtual schools full-time and virtual courses in a blended learning environment. So I'm going to check that box as yes. The Constitution, next year I'll get a different letter from somebody else and it'll tell me something else, and that's why it's called an opinion. And I have an opinion as well, so I'm just going to check that box, because next year I'll read a different letter. Funding is always a concern, and that's why the appropriate motion on this bill, if it was to report, would be to report and refer. So I will check that box. Any other comments or questions from the subcommittee? Is there a motion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
make a motion, in light of the plenary power, legislative powers that we have from our conversation, the ability to choose to act on a particular subject matter, I would move to report. And refer.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion on the table to report and refer House Bill 1400. All those in favor say aye. Sorry, there's discussion on the motion. Yes, Delegate Dudenkamp.
How does this vote affect the possible vote on Delegate Bulova's bill? I mean, are we I don't know that, comparing side by side, but is it a fair opportunity for Delegate Bulova to be able to have both of them? And is it a matter of picking and choosing between the two?
I, as subcommittee chair, having read the substitute on both, I would say that they are different enough that I'd be comfortable voting for both of them or voting for neither of them.
Mr. Chairman, as the gentleman may recall from our last meeting, I brought this up with Delegate Lemonier's bills and Delegate Murphy's bills, and we were encouraged to consider all of them accordingly, so thank you. The chairman's recommendation. I think was-
So is it possible for us to approve and refer both bills?
It is very possible. It's possible to send both bills, depending on what happens in the Senate, to the governor.
Which is what we did the last
Okay.
committee meeting.
Didn't know.
We can do that. There is a motion to report and refer the bill, and there is a second. All those in favor of reporting and referring House Bill 14 say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
There are 2 noes. Thank you, Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Bulova, I'm going to lay some quick groundwork. We leaked over. I hope you won't hear from Pat Lacey, so that'll save us about 9 minutes, so that's good. And we will hear this bill in total. I remind the members that the guidelines of the House are that if you have a full committee, the expectation is you would go to that full committee. I would ask for a little bit of deference of 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and just, we got to get through this bill and give him the appropriate amount of time, so please do your best, subcommittee members. Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we do have Secretary Trent and Assistant Secretary Foy here who can help answer questions after I go through, and Mr. Chairman, we do have a substitute.
Move substitute.
Move the substitute.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. There is a substitute on House Bill 1764 that is now properly before us. Delegate Bulova.
So I'm going to give some really quick history, and I'm going to just blow right through the key features of the bill. And so what we have is really the genesis of the virtual learning work group formed by the Department of Education in response to the governor's veto of Delegate Bell's House Bill 8. As Delegate Bell expressed, the veto was rooted in the creation of a statewide virtual school. I think their concerns were both constitutional. I think the concerns also were rooted in creating a brand new bureaucracy that would handle full-time virtual education. I think to his credit, as was discussed, the governor, rather than just simply dismissing virtual education, recognized that there's a place for it. And so whether it's because it's disabled, or whether you want to focus on a particular area, or even bullying, there's a home for this. The original idea was a regional model. When we put that out to the stakeholders, I think we saw that as potentially cumbersome, and so the substitute, quite frankly, cuts to the chase. It's much simpler and much more straightforward. What the bill does have in common with Delegate Bell's bill is that it answers the question that I do get from constituents from time to time, which is, I want to be able to send my child to receive full-time virtual education, but I'm really nervous about the fact that my county relies on a contractual relationship with another locality, and that could disappear at any moment. Where this bill is different, and I think it's a key area, is that it keeps the program based in the local school district. So it ensures that you have that opportunity for full-time virtual education, but that it's done constitutionally. And I know that there are people who say that's ambiguous. This is clearly constitutional, so we don't have to worry about that issue with this bill. And also it makes sure that because your student is embedded in the school district, that they don't get detached from their local school. And so you have the wraparound services that enable that student to go ahead and succeed holistically. I'll touch on that a little bit in a couple seconds. I think the big key feature here, again, is that each school division must provide a full-time virtual education option. And so that's line 291. And so again, when we're talking about making sure everybody has access, that is a key piece of this that says you must provide that virtual full-time option. There are 3 ways that a locality can do this under this bill. Divisions have always had the option of creating their own full-time virtual education program. Nothing changes, and so if a locality wants to do that, they've got all the authority in the world to do that. They can contract with one or more multi-division online providers to deliver these services, or they can band together with other divisions in order to enter those contracts together. With regard to the contracting, a locality can do that in 2 ways. And so again, they can contract with a multi-online division provider separately, and that's already the case. And so they can do that. Or, and this is again a key part of this bill, and you can find it on line 137, is that the Department of Education takes the lead to negotiate favorable rates with the multi-division online providers that any division can then opt into. So this has a number of advantages. Number 1, it allows DOE to do the vetting in terms of the quality. It provides an economy of scale that I think is very, very important. And with respect to the local divisions, it greatly simplifies that process. And so they have a contract vehicle that they can lock into and ride without having to go through the bureaucracy and administrative expense of doing that themselves. In fact, it's modeled after how DOE does textbooks today. A couple of other important points on page 12 that I'll go through really quickly. So 2% Delegate Bell puts a hard cap of 2% on each school division. This bill, at least as written, is more accommodating by saying the school divisions have to provide a minimum of 2%. It doesn't prohibit them from doing more if they think it works. There's language on equal access, so regarding access of all students, including those with disabilities. Similar to Delegate Bell's language, having language in there that says that any online provider has to meet the standards of quality and standards of learning. Student services, and again, I said I'd touch on this real quickly. Because the student remains enrolled in their local district and their local school, they are entitled to all the services and programs and activities that in the school that you're enrolled in. So if you're talking about being able to engage in sports or other programs, you can do that. And quite frankly, it keeps the connection, so if a student is struggling in a virtual program, that they have that support system back at home. And finally, accountability and reporting. There's language in here early on in the bill that has DOE collect up the information about how this is working, how it's rolling out, and then reports that back to the DOE, the governor, and the General Assembly. And then there's a delayed enactment of July 1, 2018. I wanted to end with the funding, because I know this is where we really trip up on a lot of these virtual education bills. It's relatively simple. Because these are locally based programs, the locality would continue to receive the state share, and they would still be responsible for maintaining their local share. Simple as that. Where you have multi-districts that want to cooperate, and so if you've got Fairfax County and Loudoun County, or you've got Fairfax City and Fairfax County, they want to cooperate, we're going to leave it up to them to figure out how they're going to structure that. I don't see any reason if you have 2 localities or more that want to get together, we shouldn't be micromanaging how they do that. They're gonna know best, and so one size doesn't fit all. So anyways, very much appreciate your consideration. You know, again, I think this is a way of moving forward in a definitely constitutional way, and in a way that keeps the student grounded in their local school district and doesn't create a brand new statewide bureaucracy. So I'm happy to take questions. I know the secretary and the assistant secretary are willing to take questions as well.
So before we get started, did we move the substitutes?
No.
Can we do that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Good, thank you. The substitute is properly before us. It has been explained. As we get subcommittee members thinking about questions, just one that jumped in, Delegate Bulova, from me. So you have a joint agreement from Loudoun, Fairfax, and Allegheny County. They've determined to come together and set up a full-time virtual program. The members of that full-time virtual school play on which football team?
They would be attached to their own football team.
Mr. Chairman.
And it could be any other activity, lab or sport or extra school.
It's the contract mechanism that's the part that will be coordinating, and will always remain within their local school.
Thank you. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm not mistaken, under current Virginia high school guidelines, they would be able to play for any school. As a full-time virtual student, they would have to do it.
Okay. So no participation based on the current code. Maybe the governor will sign the TiVo bill. Any other, thank you, Delegate Bell. Any rebuttal to that? I might have missed that piece of it in here, of them not being able to participate at all because they don't take 5 past 5? Is this DSHL saying, or what is it?
A full-time virtual student, according to what Dr. Holmes told us in his presentation, they have not determined if they're eligible.
Okay. So that's at the VHSL level.
But, Mr. Chairman, to a direct question of mine, they said that they were working on a plan.
It's not there yet. Delegate Dudek.
That's, a statement is, I mean, they've responded in that, of course, I think that tears down the barriers to a TiVo type thing too, so it serves multiple purposes.
Yes, Cindy.
Delegate Gleason, thank you for recommending me. Just some clarification on that point, because the students would still be enrolled in their home school divisions, they would be able to play sports. Is that correct, Mark?
Thank you. Are there other questions of the subcommittee members?
Chairman.
Delia Robinson.
On line 309 through 311, just for clarification, provide free and appropriate education, including special education for children with disabilities to participate in full-time virtual programs. I would think that children with disabilities might benefit with a combination of, and I would be concerned that they would lose that free, free and appropriate education if they're not full-time virtual, but maybe it's a half and half because of their disability, they may be able to participate with something.
I might be wrong, Delegate Bulova, you have a thought on that, and then I'm gonna ask Ryan what's embedded in provision 22.1-215, which is probably where that answer lies,
Okay.
but
Mr. Chairman, and perhaps Assistant Secretary Boyd can add on if necessary, but my understanding is that there's already existing code that provides students and parents, or students with disabilities, their parents, and the school divisions have to work out the best possible program. And so this doesn't preclude them from doing that. This just basically says that your full-time virtual education program has to be available for those who have disabilities. But ultimately, there's other parts of the code that drive making sure that the parents and the schools come up with the very best option.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Delia Robinson.
So in other words, it depends on their IEP.
Sir, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the bill? Yes, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee this morning. I want to thank Delegate Bulova for his hard work on this bill. I also want to thank Delegate Bell, who has worked this tirelessly for the last several years. We appreciate you working with us. Delegate Bulava's bill and the substitute that you have before him is the final iteration of what we've done. We have worked closely at Delegate Bulava with his office, trying to make sure that we get as close as we can. As he mentioned, there is a letter that I received on Monday from the Attorney General's office saying that this is unconstitutional. We don't need to really talk about that. But I do want to just stress three things. One thing is that over the summer, the governor directed the Department of Education to pull together a work group to really do a deep dive into virtual education and to give us some recommendations. They came back with recommendations. Those recommendations have improved over time as we've continued to get input from various stakeholders. And so I just want to thank you guys and hope you will support this bill.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
And I can answer any questions that you might have.
Are there others in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the bill? Barry?
Thank you, Barry. I want to speak for the Fairfax and the Norfolk Federation of Teachers. You know, I'm still agreeing with Dr. Smith and the gentleman from Chesapeake over here and with Mr. Lacy. The quality issue is still there for us. I mean, the student-pupil ratio is still a big issue for us. On the other hand, this bill does get us to, closer to where we think it should be, and that is Delegate Bell's bill has this concept that we're uncomfortable with in the school board in the sky, you know, kind of thing, and I coined that from you, actually, that term. This does a better job because it requires the school division to provide full-time, at least 5 courses, virtual learning and instruction for 2% of the population across the K-12, but can accomplish it in a few different ways, and that is to provide their own full-time virtual programming, as Holly said. It can track with one or more multi-division online providers to deliver those services, and it can band together within the other division and enter into a contract with the most. And I'm glad that point was clarified over here. In addition, these full-time virtual school students would be eligible to participate in interscholastic programs, including sports and other activities. We were really happy to see that. The school division of residence would remain responsible for providing special education and student services to each student enrolled in the full-time virtual program and will continue to receive state and federal funds associated with providing such services. So it's education back down to the local level that we like to see it. And finally, the division would be responsible for ensuring equitable access to full-time virtual program to all students. The responsibility will include adopting policies to ensure that the student can take advantage of the virtual program options regardless of whether they're able to find their own computer and internet access or disabilities are not denied access because of their disability. Parents would also maintain the ability to request virtual options for their students. We like the parent input on this.
Thank you, Barry. Others that would like to speak briefly in favor of the bill? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Steve Horton with K-12 Inc. We are one of the multi-division online providers. We have a program currently with 1,500 students enrolled from all of your districts, from 120 different districts across the state, in partnership with Richmond, Patrick County, City of Richmond, Patrick County, and King and Queen County. It's unclear to us, I just saw the bill this morning, how this affects their ability to continue to enroll in that program. The students who live in Fairfax and Falls Church, the students who live in Highland County. So it's unclear. It looks to me, on looking at earlier draft, that this would create a very large and burdensome tuition for these students to pay to enroll, to continue to enroll in the program that they are in. Although I'm not clear if that is in this version. I'll go by earlier versions. So I would have a question, I would just ask that question to determine if students are unable to enroll in other jurisdictions without penalty. The other issue that I think my client would have, we have arrangements currently, like I said, with Richmond and Patrick and King and Queen for full-time virtual education where those students are enrolled from around the state. We break this into 100 different school contracts that are being administered. Some of these contracts, some of these programs are going to be particularly small. I know we talked about the demand for virtual education, and it's there. Currently, we've got about 30 jurisdictions that have 10 or more students over 8 grades, so maybe 1 per grade. The other 100, the other 90 are below 10. So even if this quadrupled, you're talking about potentially small numbers in some of these jurisdictions. And so it's a question of, is it worth it to go talk to the folks in Brunswick or not? Is it, and so I believe trying to get people into that marketplace may be a challenge by creating 132 different
Delegate Bullock.
If I could.
In
Sure.
And so, I think the important thing to focus on here is that the Department of Education will negotiate those contracts. And so you don't need to negotiate with every single jurisdiction throughout Virginia. Those jurisdictions get to look at what the DOE has negotiated with you, and they can provide those contracts. And so you've got efficiencies and you've got, economies of scale that frankly we've all worked out that I think, allows, any operator to do what they need to do efficiently, but quite frankly has the potential to save the Commonwealth money by making sure that we're doing this large scale and not small scale.
So Delegate Bullock, from a scale perspective, I get that at the contracting rates, but what's the infrastructure that Loudoun has to set up to support 5 kids who decide to take virtual education in Loudoun? The comment made of 100+ really small virtual schools is the one that is now spinning around in my head, and I just don't know the answer to that. I haven't squared that in my head. Is Loudoun going to set up an entire infrastructure which says they must do that, and only 5 people enroll? I hope it's more, but that's what we have to be thoughtful of. Any reaction to that?
And Mr. Chairman, again, the contract mechanism has already been developed. You simply have to administer the contract, and then the student, works through the virtual program. And so, to the degree that you manage any kind of contract, I think it's the contract management that's going to be the same regardless of how many students you apply through it.
Thank you, Delegate Bullock. And
Would the contracts then set what the grading scale is for each of the jurisdictions? Since all the teaching is going to be to the same students, or would we have different grading scales for each of the jurisdictions, or each school division in those contracts? Because I think that's what you end up with, is you end up with the demands of the local school divisions may be different for what they expect from a virtual program. Since in your instance, and I applaud what you're trying to do, I appreciate the movement from the regional. I know we've talked about some of the concerns there. But you're creating these different expectations for the different school divisions as opposed to the parents. And so the current system we have is a relationship between the parent and the school division where they're enrolled, Richmond or Patrick or King and Queen. This one becomes a relationship between the school division where they live, and so it ties it right back to their zip code, and that determines what the demands of those local school divisions are.
Are there others in the audience that would like to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chairman,
Opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Chris White with the Vector Corporation, here for PSO again. I just raised 3 quick points. This is the first time I've had a chance to look at the substitute, but I would mention and appreciate Secretary Trent and Ms. Coy. We spent a little bit of time yesterday together, so I want to just thank them for walking us through this a little bit. I'm not sure that this bill or this model really offers parents true choice. Because if an individual locality, either individually or jointly, doesn't choose to enter into one of these contracts, if I'm a parent, what do I do? Where do I go? So that would be number 1. Number 2, the work group that worked on this throughout the course of the year.
On that point, I think the legislation says that each division shall set this up.
So, then if they shall, and they don't contract with a multi-division online provider, then the content is all going to be provided by the local school district. Some
Totally get
parents,
that, but I just want to make sure you
Right.
know that they shall set this up.
so if a parent chooses an alternative form of education because they don't like what the local school division is providing, this bill would limit their ability to choose. Secondly, I want to make sure everybody knows that the work group that was mentioned earlier, they met twice throughout the off session. Not every member of the work group agreed with this model. Finally, we heard a lot of testimony and a lot of comments made about quality. I'm here to tell you that the students in the current Virginia Virtual Academy, 100% of them take the SOL test for the last 2 years. In 2015, they met or exceeded the state average in 8 out of the 10 tests that were offered. In 2016, 10 out of 13 beat the state average. We have a school that is succeeding and is teaching our students and doing a great job. Delegate Bell's model will provide a stable and sustainable path for the future. I'm not sure that this model would do the same thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Back to subcommittee. Are there questions or comments from members of the subcommittee?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Bell.
I have some concerns about something that was mentioned a couple of times about potential for 100 or 130 different virtual schools. That concerns me. I can't also, reading through the bill very quickly, I'm not clear on the selection process for which students get to choose virtual. Clearly, it's not the same parental choice that my bill provides. So, I think in the original bill, it was decided by the schools, guidance counselors, and some combination. But I, just quickly looking, I can't find that. It may be in here. The other thing, what happens if there's movement from one school division to another? If we set up these virtual school divisions and they're different. To some extent, I think they would all be somewhat different unless you go with the one umbrella provider. So it's not clear to me what happens there either.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the subcommittee? Delegate Bullock, I'll give you the last word. Words.
I'll be very brief. I appreciate everybody's time on this and everybody's work on this. Again, I think that this offers a lot of strengths that, again, mandates that everybody has the option of participating in full-time virtual education. But I think as all of us recognize, there's a lot of benefit to making sure that's tied to your local community, where you have those wraparound services, where you have that support, where you have not only academics, but also sports, in order to go ahead and do that. It provides certainly our localities with an option for which path they want to choose. I see that as a real healthy thing, quite frankly, because you're going to get information back that says which programs are working at which localities. And quite frankly, I think that will foster competition and improvement among our multi-division online providers and make sure that we have that quality in the future. So I hope you would act favorably on it.
Thank you, Delegate Bullock. One quick question for any or all of the school divisions. Is there a cost associated with this unfunded mandate to require you guys to set up a virtual school? No cost? Everybody's good?
I think it's gonna be a setup cost, I'm sure.
So next year, you're not gonna come back to me and ask if we can have some money for
But utilizing the ADM plus local, I haven't heard concerns of
Yeah,
that.
you guys are good. It's a legitimate question. I just wanna make sure that we don't have 132 people raising their hands saying, hey, we need $20,000 each to do this. Okay, thank you. Good. Any other comments or questions from the subcommittee?
Mr. Chairman, based
Yes,
on what Delegate Bullock has presented, it addresses the constitutional issue and also the local board control. Therefore, I make a motion to report.
There is a motion to report the bill. Is there a second?
Second. Can I second?
Technically, the answer is yes. Okay. I prefer you don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
There's a motion and a second on reporting the substitute for House Bill 1764. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of reporting say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
I'm an aye.
No. I'm opposed. So it passes 4-3. The bill has reported 4-3. Delegate Bullock, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there is one more bill. We are not going to hear it. There's two more bills. Lemunion's bill and my very, very excellent School Divisions of Innovation bill. We will hear that next time. The committee shall rise.
Stretches out longer if you want.